Kevin here, and this is not going to be your average travel video because you're going to help solve a mystery in this one. Now, I am going to take you to a couple of interesting locations here in a minute, but we're going to work together to try to figure out one of the mysteries concerning Elvis, which is this. How come Elvis's twin brother was never moved to Graceland? So let's get to it. Now, if there's something I hate, it's that these people that they spend 2 minutes doing research and they run around and pitch whatever it is as some kind of absolute fact. Where they got their information from, even if it's Wikipedia, Wikipedia just got their information from scraping other websites. There's a lot of untrue things out there on the internet, but just like tales did previously in history, if they're passed down enough and passed down enough and passed down enough and repeated the same way, people start to take those stories as fact, even if there's nothing to back them up. Now, here's what we know. Elvis had a twin brother that died at birth. Jesse Garon, Elvis Aaron. Because his family was pretty much poverty-stricken, as it goes, the baby was buried in this cemetery, in an unmarked grave, in a shoebox. Now, this is where you start getting into all kinds of speculation, because there are a few Presleys here, and because there was an unmarked grave that appeared to have never been used, all the speculation was that was where, of course, he was buried. And that is just speculation, because you have to remember, we're talking 1935, in the Deep South, in massive poverty, in the middle of the Depression. Did they bury him in some kind of family plot? Maybe. Did they just come out here and randomly bury him somewhere? Maybe. There were a lot of things that went on in that time period that we would look at and frown on today. But it was a different era. Things were done differently. Things were looked at differently when things were done that were not exactly legal. This is not who we're looking for, but from this same time period, this date scribbled in, 1934, this was someone who did not have a lot of money either. This was someone who died that was 20 years old, written into the concrete they used to make this, probably with a stick. As for Elvis's brother, the prevailing thought has always been this little spot you see behind me with the flowers was the unmarked spot of Elvis's brother. I'll move around here and let you see why. Now here we have Presley's. 1, 2, and 3. And what was always thought was a 4th spot here. And someone has actually gone as far as putting a plaque in. This was not here a couple of years ago. This was never here before. The only thing you basically had was a couple of rocks piled up here. So this is part of the video where I ask you, hey, if you're enjoying this so far, click that like button. And if you have other friends that are interested in Elvis, click that share button down there and share this video with them. So because of the conditions he was buried in, stillborn baby in a shoebox, buried somewhere, even knowing the site, there was no way realistically to be able to exhume that site and move it to Memphis. And again, that's even if anyone really knew where the location was. Because once Elvis's father passed away, a couple of years after Elvis died, he may have been the last one to really know where Elvis's twin was actually buried down here. Now, there are some other points we need to discuss real quick before we go back and look at this. First of all, there were statements from other people that people in the church actually took the baby and buried it. somewhere. So it's possible that wasn't even done in this cemetery. It's possible that Elvis's father never even knew where the neighbors, the church people, wherever took this baby and buried it. This location is several miles from the actual home spot. Again, you have to remember it's 1935, the poor South. Here's another thing that you need to keep in mind. People are shocked sometimes at different things that come up in deathbed confessions, because there are secrets that people harbored, and they were much better at keeping secrets in generations back than this share all, share every feeling internet age that we have become accustomed to. And I'm going to give you another example of why this information that everyone's taken for a fact is probably wrong. If you noticed, I showed the 3 graves. 2 were older graves. 1 was much later than 1935 that was in that section. And the 4th grave that everyone just assumed is where it went, because there's 4 plots there. And I can tell you a short story from my own family, again in the South. For whatever reason, the way things were done, about 15 years after this, no one could figure out why my grandparents bought the number of plots that they bought, because it never added up right to the number of children they had plus them. Any way you did the math, it didn't add up right. And this went through my family my entire life. Nobody could figure out why my grandparents had done what they did at the time they purchased these. And my grandfather was basically an illiterate coal miner and had lost a son in the war at the time, and that's why he bought plots. He needed one, and he bought a lot. After doing much research and talking to many, many people, I finally found out the reason, and that was, in this era, grave plots were generally sold in sets of 4. That would explain why there's 4 plots here that's in this little Presley area. Was this burial done in this 4th plot? Again, that's the assumption. But depending on which story you follow, Elvis's father wasn't in attendance at this. He would have been with his wife, who just struggled with these births, and his new baby, and friends, neighbors, church people, whomever actually handled this burial. Did the family have a plot and say, sure, go ahead and put him here, and the cemetery wasn't notified? That's very possible. Again, you have to remember things were done differently at that time. So this is why I said we're going to present the evidence to you, several ways this could have gone, and let you draw your own conclusion, because quite honestly, the people that claim to know and be experts in this stuff, they really don't know. The one thing that's going to be agreed on is wherever this baby was buried, there was no realistic way decades later to exhume that body and have it moved to Graceland. As a matter of fact, Elvis wasn't originally buried at Graceland. He was buried in a cemetery a couple miles away, as was his mother. It's very possible that he didn't even know where. It's very possible his father didn't really know where in Tupelo this had been done. So this is a spot at least that people can come and pay their respects. And also just ponder how things would have been different if this child had lived, if Elvis had grown up with his twin brother. Would he have gotten into the musical thing at all? Obviously, his life would have been much different growing up as a brother. And you've heard me talk about pivot points and things that change in life, your life and my life at different points. This was certainly one for Elvis, even at birth. Okay, I've got to know what this is. There is a Chuck E. Cheese in Tupelo. And someone left a Chuck E. Cheese token. Herschel, buddy, I hate to tell you, but I don't think Hazel's coming to join you. I think she found somebody else.